My name is Sabith Khan, and I'm the Program Director of the MPPA program. I want to welcome you this evening to our second MPPA policy talks for this year. And I hope you're all doing well and safe in these very trying times. And we're glad that you're able to join us this evening. And I'm, as I said, the program director of the Masters of Public Policy and Administration program. And our program has been around for about 40 plus years, and we have served our state, country, and the world at large in producing several hundred alumni who continue to work across all borders, both home and abroad. And our mission of the program, for those who are new or who do not know much about us, is to equip and produce leaders who are able to use analytical tools and real world experience to deal with the challenges and opportunities of policy making and public leadership in an ever changing and diverse world. And with everything going on in the world today, both on the economic front, social, cultural, as well as the climate front, I think our students and alumni have a big role to play in defining and shaping many of the issues facing us. So towards this, we have organized this talk with two very distinguished speakers, Professor Jamshid Damooei, who is a professor of economics at California Lutheran University in the economics department, and Fabiola Lara, founder and principal consultant of EquaNurture, also based in Southern California. I will do a quick introduction of both of them and then hand it over to Dr. Damooei, who will share his presentation, followed by Fabiola, and then we'll have some time for Q&As. So be prepared with your questions or comments subsequently. So let me start with Dr. Damooei. Dr. Jamshid Damooei is a well-known economist at California Lutheran University, and he needs no introduction to those of us in Southern California. He has carried out several important and groundbreaking studies. Most importantly, for those of you who are familiar with the State of the Region reports, several reports on the contribution of migrants, and also he is organizing a conference, which I'm helping with in next month, actually, on the 28th, on living a dignified life in the Central Coast of California. So please keep an eye out for that conference updates, and we'd love for you to join as well. And Fabiola Lara is, as I said, founder as well as principal consultant of EquaNurture, which is a woman and minority-owned technical advisory service firm that applies science-based and culturally relevant and intersectional approaches rooted in equity and nurturing care to improve outcomes for children, families, and their environments. So with this introduction, let me hand it over to Dr. Damooei to start his presentation for 15 minutes, and then we'll have Fabiola presenting her presentation. Go ahead, Dr. Damooei.
Thank you very much, Sabith, for the introduction. Good evening to everyone. I want to join Sabith and hope that this fire did not do any harm to you and to your loved ones, and hopefully we will recover from that problem and life will become better. I have a presentation, if I may just share it with you, and then I'll go over it and then explain what it contains. Okay. Do you see my presentation, everyone? Yes? Okay, good. The topic is about early childhood education and its benefit for California. This topic, I became quite interested and started research on that back in 2017-18. I had a project with the Ventura Community Foundation, and then I continued that, updated it, and I'll tell you a little more about it as we progress, and I present, certain section of this. And then also we actually wrote, when I say we, it's a very good friend of ours who's actually a doctoral student, Ruslan Karchakin. We published a paper on that for the state of California. And I think Ruslan is probably among the audience who's watching this program. We'll get to that. Let me start with okay. The topic that I want to bring out in the limited time we have are going to focus on these four major issues. One is that how important it is to have a high quality early child education, and I want to reflect on how that much really benefit not only our children, but the economy as a whole. So that's one topic, one issue. Then we take some things away from the study that we conducted on the early child education for the state of California. So you can see the kind of picture of that, what I said, that, the map of the childhood deprivation. So we can look at that and understand a little, get a feel for the matter and see how that really goes around. One thing which is very important and is, again, it's another pivotal issue of this presentation, is that how much resources we have that we do not use, we do not really utilize. So we're going to reflect on that. And so finally, we're going to look at what's around us. And maybe we have a pilot project of that, which is called Project Isabella in Santa Paula in Ventura County. So when we look at the establishing a high quality early child education, so what are the barriers? What are the possibilities, in fact, as well as barriers? One of the things that's it's very important to be mindful of that is the prevalence of poverty, and I'm going to pay special attention to that my presentation tonight. And the impact of the adverse living condition in the early childhood. There's plenty of literature on that, so obviously you won't be able to get into it. I give you references that you can read more about it, and they're all in the bottom of the some of the charts that I present. So healthcare condition, it's really impact that, when we talk about early child education. There are a number of what is called socioeconomic, and particularly the isolation that we have, ranging from the English language isolation to many other ways that we have. Parental support and resources. When we talk about parental support, we're not talking about the love of parents. Obviously, that's given. Everybody love their children. But the question is enabling them to help their children. That's a different issue, and that we have to really look at it in a different way. And then understanding some of the practices, as I mentioned, and then seeing that what is that we have to do, so to speak, the policy implication of that, what we're discussing. One thing which is very important, and I want you to pay special attention to that, is that when we talk about poverty, there are two aspects of it. There are multiple aspects. But one is the kind of the moral imperative of poverty, and particularly poverty among children. But I want to prove to you that there is another angle to it, which often people do not pay attention to it, and that is the economic necessity of taking poverty out. Look, being under poverty, you can't just have a magic wand on tomorrow and eradicate it. But there is no reason, there is absolutely no reason that people who are in poverty should have a life of poverty. They're two different things. And I can't really, again, get to the bottom of all of that in detail, but I will bring that up as much as we have. This is a result of a study. Again, the references are for you to look at it. And that was done 2018 based on the data from 2015. The bottom line, if you see the cost of poverty rising from having children in poverty in the United States, if you look at all these items, I don't have to read them, but you can always ask for a copy of this presentation. I'm pretty sure Dr. Khan has got it, on the MPPA program, or it would be on the website. You can just download it. The total cost that here you see is about 5.4% of the United States GDP. For those of you who are economists or know economics or macroeconomics in particular, you know that the best year that the United States can really hope to have a high rate of growth, that's about 3% or a little more. And and that is, for a variety of reasons, 5.4%. preventing poverty. So it's really a matter. In fact, poverty is one of the most, if not the most debilitating factor in an economy that you have to really be mindful of that. And children in particular is a very important part to really bear in mind. So let's move on. Okay, I think, okay. So this ECDI. So what is that? This is a index that we created, Russell and I, and there are thematic issues in that particular index. So I listed them. The ability to receive attention that need from the parents and years of their lives, economic challenges that imposed on families by low income, educational attainment of parents, particularly mothers. They are really important issue because the issue of education is not just the income, although that is correlated to income, is also the ability to receive information, to really follow them, to take advantage of the availability of the opportunity that exists. And these are all the important issues. And another thing that I want to really talk about here is that the way that our economies work, we have a lot of what is called pay gaps. So one of them is gender pay gap. And I put in particular these numbers, which is for 2022. I still really, I don't know why we're not working, as aggressively as we can to eliminate gender pay gap and other type of pay gaps, racial pay gaps, ethnicity pay gaps, all sorts of things. Why don't we do it? The reason I say we don't do it, because if you look at the long-term data over decades, 2 decades, it has moved in certain areas, got better, but not as fast as it could have been or it can be. And when you see the programs for the future, it doesn't really give me much confidence either. So here it is. We have a gender pay gap in California for 2022, about 75%, and in our own county is about 73%. So it's even really, so in other words, women make about 75% of men's. And then when it comes to breakup of the family, that unfortunately is very prevalent, usually children in the young age left with the mothers, and what we do, we pay them less. The system is geared towards that, which means that we will call what is called feminization of poverty. Look, there is no doubt about it. You can't really just hide it. It's true. So move on. This is that EDCI. So there are 11 indicators here. Obviously, on your screen, depends on how big or small they are. You can't read them all, but these are taken from different indicators, ranged again based on the thematic issues that I presented a little earlier on. So if you look at that, so this is all the different counties in 58 counties of California. As you can see them, you want to say that where Ventura County appears. The top is the best that is, and the bottom is the least that you can see. I think Ventura County is about 21, 22 up there. And here, all of these numbers. It's very important because what we did, this data is gathered and then the data is normalized for those of you who are more into statistics. And then they're really put, on 5 different color codes. So in other words, it starts from dark green, go to dark red, and then you can see the affluence or better situation right up to where the challenges are absolutely high. And so you can see this picture here. What we have to do, because this also provides a map for any policy implication that we want to really build on it. Let me move on. This is cost of childcare as a proportion of income. And then on income, we took what is called 100%, 200%, 300%, 400% poverty level. So look, let me just sum it up that for you. If you look at the 400% poverty level, what was the level for 2024? I think it was over $31,000 for a family of 4. Just take that. So if you multiply that by 4, we talk about $125,000 a year. So they're not really living in poverty, okay? Even for them, so look at, you have a couple with 1 child, it's 12% of the family's income. If you have, a couple, a single parent with 2 children, that's 24%. So I've always said, if you want to give the best raise to family, make high quality, universal early childhood education. It benefits the country, it benefits the parents, it benefits the children. It amazes me that why we're not doing it. Fast forward. This is another chart which you could really need a little more time, to comprehend and dive into it. Sabith, I want to be on time, so I'm rushing to get through that. I think I have another 4 minutes.
Yeah, a few minutes, yeah.
Okay, this chart is like this. So this is, again, all the 58 counties that we have in California, and this is the latest data. So you look at that, what percentage of children are entitled to federal preschooling entitlement. So this is the blue ones. What percentage are entitled to the state? And that's the kind of reddish one, here. And then what percentage do not have any entitlement? That's the gray one. For the state of California, 59% have entitlement. So if you really look at it, let's say 60-40 to make life easier. So Ventura County, I think, is 55-45. So what does that mean? So we then calculated, what would be the cost based on average of the cost of the licensed, child care or child education providers. So we use that unit of account. And then we multiply that by all these numbers. So we have something around about, these are actually 3 years and 4 years. We have somewhere just under a million, so 900 and some, 19,000 children in that age in the state of California. The bottom line, the total cost that we estimated is about 11 billion, 11.1, 11.2 billion dollars. That is to run them based on that unit cost. But what percentage of that should be actually given? Because based on entitlement, that's $6.6 billion. Are we spending that? No. Why aren't they getting it? These are the issues. So we don't really have that. Look, usually in California, United States, what they have called entitlement. So you have to prove that you can get it. I understand. If you're talking about housing vouchers or you're talking about, food stamps, you probably have to. Why on earth we need to provide entitlement with proof that we need child assistance for early childhood education? It should be universal, just like elementary schools are, and then high quality. And that is the greatest investment that a state or a country can absolutely undertake. So this is very important to really look into that. And this is another slide of that which map them. We kind of like, mapping, and then the dark means that the amount of dollar is higher. And obviously it's also a function of the size of the counties. Ventura, California is a really fascinating state. You've got, a county like Los Angeles, which has got about 10 million. You've got some small counties, which is about, 1,500 or 1,200. So it's a very, mixed bag there. So these are, again, those numbers, we put them, in the map so it can be seen better. So what do we do? We're very important. We need to have investment, which is creating the physical infrastructure. We need workforce. What is better than for a state of California to provide money, how we can train, qualified early childhood education teachers and trainers and others. So universities, can have in their School of Education, have that. Best investment. We need transportation. We need to get the trust of the parents. Many of them don't trust their 3-year-old, 4-year-old with the system. So it's important. We need to have community meetings, bring them along, work with them. It's not just a question of money. You have to provide the infrastructure that make this type of investment effective. And this is not something for the first time being done on earth. There are so many European countries have it. Some of them have very good ones. And I don't really understand why a state like California, that is such an affluent state, doesn't do it and just keep talking about this stuff. More detailed information are there, and I'm done. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. May. That was well on time and great information there. We'll come back with some questions, but let's go with Fabiola with your presentation, please.
Right.
Perfect. We can see your screen. Perfect.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Damooei, for that presentation. And it's really great to be here with everyone today. I would just like to add my remarks that I hope that you are staying safe and that you are protected. So I'm going to be focusing my presentation today on climate change. So I will be continuing the discussion in regards to early childhood, but I'll specifically focus in the context of climate change and as it relates to societal well-being, which Dr. Damooei also mentioned in a sort of different context. So just to give you an overview, he sort of discussed in terms of the importance of the early years. So I'll just kind of do a quick recap of that. I'll also talk about how climate change is impacting young children and families. Of course, we are experiencing that now for those of us that are local to the Los Angeles, Ventura, surrounding areas. And so we are very much seeing the a real life situation of what that looks like. Then I'll also talk a little bit about why it is important to focus on early childhood education in the context of climate change, and especially now, again, given what we are experiencing here in California, and how policies and systems can support early childhood education to build safer and more resilient environments. So we already know that the science reveals that the early childhood years are essential for healthy physical, psychosocial, mental development. These years really serve as a foundation for long-term success in school and life. And so, of course, we've heard in the previous presentation that it probably the most important investment that a society can make is in early childhood education, but especially investing in the early years. It not only secures children's rights to thrive, to develop into healthy beings, and of course, there are some neurological and economic benefits for society. And especially in the context of climate change, it is especially important for societies to be able to adapt, have the capacity to be flexible, because of course this leads to climate resilience. ECE programming that promotes the early years really equips children, we know, with the skills and tools needed to care for each other, for the planet. It can also serve as a powerful equalizer, especially among poor and marginalized populations, which we know are limited in their ability to shield themselves from harmful exposure to toxins, climate shocks, and damage. So what you're seeing here in the screen is actually the Nurturing Care Framework. It was developed by the World Health Organization and several other organizations that essentially it promotes this roadmap of action for as it relates to essential services and policies and interventions that children and families need for nurturing care, which refers to the conditions that enable communities and caregivers or parents and other adults that are caring for children that secures their ability to promote these 5 components. So in the context of climate change, well, we're seeing a lot in California in terms of adequate health. Children are experiencing severe risks right now with the wildfires and windstorms in terms of toxins being released into the air and other hazards. Children also face deficiencies in terms of access to quality food and just generally reduce access to nourishment We're seeing quite a bit of examples of families seeking, for example, a formula for babies. And it's especially important for us to pay attention to this component because children, as we know, they are developing, they're experiencing growth, they are smaller in their body size, and so they are considered the most vulnerable in these situations and the highest at risk. We also know that extreme weather and natural disasters also increase the risk of children being neglected by their caregivers. Caregivers are under a lot of stress during these times, and as we've seen in the wildfires, many have also lost their homes, and so this can lead to several incidents of children being neglected and impacting responsive caregiving, which is the third component here. Young children's safety and security is also at risk, as we've seen more recently that access to clean water is quite limited. The city of Pasadena has sent out some guidance around that. And of course, these sorts of extreme events could lead to negative behavior toward children, where caregivers might react in sort of violent or various aggressive ways. And finally, in terms of opportunities for early learning, we've seen the closure of many schools. We've also seen the devastation of schools in different learning spaces. And so this is another such event where children's opportunity to learn and to develop is also impacted. So why focus on early childhood education in the context of climate change? Well, there are several reasons, but I've sort of focused on a few here. We know that children tend to respond better to these sorts of natural disasters, and living in California, we will experience more of this, unfortunately. And so it is really essential for children to be prepared, to be aware, and also for caregivers, as children in this age group tend to rely on these sorts of supportive interactions and secure environments that caregivers can offer. We also know that ECE programming builds children's confidence, and it can empower, especially ECE programming can serve as a sort of climate resilience strategy, empowering young children to serve as agents of change. It's also important to advocate and promote child-sensitive climate policies. We know that, including in California, there's several policies around climate related issues, but very few are linked specifically to early childhood education. And so this lack of understanding on the benefits of early childhood education as a solution to the climate crisis is really important to address. And so it's important that policies reflect the needs of young children. It's also important to have more climate sensitive approaches to policies and state plans, because this also allows for allocation of funding and resources, and which can, of course, lead to reduction of climate risks. We know that many children, especially now, are have experienced being out of school because of the wildfires, and some have been able to be enrolled in other sorts of learning spaces and education programs. but it's important that this is also available to all children, really. And of course, it's also important to advocate and promote for these child-sensitive climate policies, because it will increase action toward improving infrastructure and climate proofing, establish early childhood systems to deliver alternative models of ECE to minimize, again, the disruption of children's safe learning spaces. So some examples of what that can look like. This can be mobilizing early childhood stakeholders, early childhood education stakeholders, so parents, teachers, other community leaders, and really engaging them around climate issues, and ensuring that they have a role in sort of implementing actions that are part of early warning systems, and that are also involved in terms of continuing education during when a disaster strikes and such, and especially in emergency settings such as those. Another example could be setting up monitoring and evidence collecting mechanisms that enable data-driven decision-making. This is especially important to track climate risks and also to understand the conditions that children need to mitigate as much risk to them as much as possible. And then, of course, another example would be integrating child-sensitive approaches in all plans, especially related to disaster risk reduction and emergency relief, and also in terms of how we are tracking air pollution. So I know a lot of us are currently tracking the AQI, and so it's essential that measures such as those also track how impacts to air pollution are affecting young children. So that's it. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Fabiola and Dr. Damooei. Those were very, very interesting and rich presentations. We do have about roughly half an hour. So this is a good amount of time for us to have a good discussion amongst ourselves. I would also like to open it up for questions from the audience. You can either ask a question or feel free to type if you're feeling shy for whatever reason. So let me give everybody 30 seconds to see if anybody has a question. Feel free to raise your hand. I see one hand raised. Lara, would you please like to go ahead? Would you like to ask a question? I think you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can. Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, you could hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my question is, I did hear Dr. Damooei state that, the women's role or mother's role is very, very important. And in terms of, being able to have that, it does have also an impact on, on the earnings and things like that, what the moms earn in being able to provide for their children, but at the same time, I also hear what Ms. Lara was explaining, being able to provide, the spaces for the children and different centers, with the impact of all of this to the early childhood. As myself being an educator, one of the things that we do see is that, for instance, kindergarten is really not, how would you say, it is not mandated that they need to attend. And I think that sometimes that really hinders a lot of some of the as I would say, from first grade up on the education of the children. And I do know that there is quality of education on early childhood and the importance of it. But I also feel like the lack of parent education in that sense, for them to really understand and know the importance of early childhood education. You know, I do know that within the district that I do work, they have implemented the preschools, which really makes a big impact when the children come into transitional K and preschool. That makes a big difference when they come into kindergarten and being able to have so many of the skills, but at the same time being able to have the students, you know, identify whether they need special needs and being able to really tackle a lot of these issues that the little ones, you know, really face. But I think most important is that it should be, I don't know, but it should be mandated that parents need to put in some time on being able to have this type of education to really understand it, because education is key and being able to provide that for them. But at the same time, being able to have these programs so that they're well coordinated and well managed so that they can be able to have, you know, being able to provide at the same time, like childcare for them to be able to attend these classes and be able to design it in a way that it'll be effective for them so that they can really attend and really focus on it. Because I think that we don't have a lot of programs that really take care of our well-being too as women. So it's a lot of issues that
Sure,
come with it on being able not only to have these centers or this education for the parents on and stressing the importance. So thank you so much for this presentation and being able to emphasize this. And I would really, you know, think that it would have a great impact on really having these recommendations for the state department, you know, I'm sorry, for the state, yes, the state of education department to be able to really get a handle on this, because these are great studies, great recommendations. So
of course, thank you.
Those are
Ms.
my
Lara.
thoughts.
Of course, thank you. I'll let Dr.
Do you
Damooei
guys
and then
have
Fabiola respond.
any
Sure, I'll be
do
glad
you
to.
have any other, you know, maybe thoughts or things that
Yes.
can be very innovative on being able to really bring the parents in and really get them going, not only the moms, but also the dads, you know, because I think sometimes they leave that role to the women, but the men are not really involved as much.
Sure,
All right, thank you.
I'll be glad to reflect on that. And thank you for your question and thank you for your suggestion. Now, let me just be frank about mandatory or optional. We're talking about 3-year, 4-year-old kids, and we're talking about, how will I use my words carefully? One has to work and get the trust of the parents to leave their 3-year-old with them, 4-year-old with them. And there is also a cultural issue, not that one culture is more accommodating, the other one is not. It's just there are cultural differences. So I think what we should do, and definitely becomes an essential part of a successful early childhood education, is that we bring parents along. We have to have definitely parent education as the important part of this. Let me give you an example. We have right now, it's called Isabella Project. That's for the city of Santa Paula. And I think, Fabiola, you came to some of the meetings, and you know, I'm in their steering committee and other stuff. And they have been going on for about 1.5 years, 2 years almost. And again, if you look at the size of the city and the children, it's under 1,000 of those kids. are there. Many of them live in very deprived area. There's a lot of stuff there, you know, on Santa Paula is a good example. And what they do, they have regular meetings and community meetings and other things with parents. Bring them along and talk with them. There are groups that are charged with actually getting in touch with parents and being able to invite them, to attract them. There are so many other things, you know, that going on with in Santa Paula as a pilot project for California, I would say, will provide that kind of experiences that we have. I certainly see the necessity of investing and attracting and educating and enabling parents to really go for that. About being mandatory, I just have a feeling that may not be very successful and it may cause a lot of problems along the way. I wish it was easy that we could mandate it, but it's very difficult to go on that path.
Thank
Sure.
you, Dr. May. Go ahead, Fabiola.
Yeah, no, I will just say quickly, I think Dr. Damooei provided some really great examples of what that can look like and some opportunities. And I would just stress that, yes, it is essential to involve parents and especially around the topic of climate change, because we know that young children's vulnerability to environmental disasters. It really increases their risk of injury. And of course, during emergency settings, young children specifically rely or are heavily dependent on the adults that are caring for them. And that's not just parents, this could be grandparents and any other adults. And so, yes, we should have interventions that include all different levels of caregivers. And so I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you, Fabiola. We do have a question from Martha. Martha, do you want to go ahead? Martha, if you're still there, feel free to ask your question. Okay, maybe she's stepped out for a second. In the meanwhile, let me ask both of you a question in the context of the fires for Fabiola and then Dr. Damooei. What kinds of actions or advocacy efforts can nonprofits and community groups take concretely to help increase access for early childhood programming? Or what can community groups do in these contexts in a very concrete way to support ECD activities?
Sure. Well, I would say that first because schools are I would say, first impact that children face because it's part of their daily routines, it's part of their daily life. I think it's important for schools to have alternative plans or alternative models to deliver early childhood education. Unfortunately, we didn't see a lot of that in some of the fires that are still ongoing. We saw quite a bit of learning spaces and schools being burnt down, and parents having to really completely register their children to new schools. And so that is not ideal because it disrupts the interactions that children are typically having with, including with their teachers and their classmates, and having to start at a new school and having to also manage or try to mitigate the sort of negative experience that they're having, right? So yeah, so first, I would say it's extremely important for schools, since they are the first that children sort of feel these impacts, for them to have alternative models to deliver early childhood education programming, either what we saw during COVID online. There was quite a bit of like online delivery models. I would say that in terms of local organizations, civil society, it's important for organizations to build connections with the local community, and also to share resources and to bring awareness to the kinds of resources that are available for families and children. And this could be in the form of like plate kits. This could be in the form of food, right? So whatever those resources are, it's important for local community leaders to work with organizations and to help identify families that are most in need.
Well,
Let me
thank you,
just
Dr. Damooei.
quickly reflect on that. So Martha is here. I can see that she can ask the question. One of the things, again, I'm really basing my comment based on the experience of Isabella project in Santa Paula. School districts can have a very important role. And one of the things about the school districts is that they're into it. They have, because we have demographic changes, and that by itself provide capacity that exists and is not fully utilized. So you could, I think it's Martha, I think you have to mute it. It's kind of echoing. So yes, so the school districts are very important because they are there, they have this experience, physical capacity some of them have, they can absorb some of it. The other part of it is what Fabiola pointed out, and I want to just build a little more on that, is you have to reach people. Reaching people is not one formula. Santa Paula, for example, a big proportion of parents are scared of coming forward because they're undocumented immigrants. And when we talk about this system, we have to put all of these things aside. Everybody is human being, undocumented, documented, whatever it is. You have to reach all. You have to make them feel safe. Transportation, other things very important. People come from different parts. There is what is called building the infrastructure. A part of this infrastructure is communication with parents, a pivotal part of it. Leaderships have come together. School districts might come together. Use the capacity that exists to utilize it for the benefit of all. And there is plenty of potential there that we can do it. I'm going to stop because there are some more questions.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Damooei. There's one from Martha, which is actually a very interesting one. Perhaps, Dr. Damooei, you could start with answering that, which is how is our country or state addressing the needs of families with medium incomes who do not qualify for federal or state preschool programs? Are there specific initiatives being implemented to support these families in ECD?
Do you want me to go, Fabiola, on
Yes,
that
please.
one? Okay. So number one, universal early childhood education, Martha. There is no reason for childhood education not to be universal. See, most countries have a lot of things universal. I think food stamps would be hard, or vouchers for rental subsidy would be hard. Universal early child education. Second one, high quality, not just daycare. High quality early child education, absolutely universal. There is no point to have that you prove that you are entitled to it. Everybody, rich and poor. If you want to send your kid to another private, it's your choice. But we got to provide high quality early child education, period. So this is the way to go about it. There is no second to it.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Damooei. Fabiola, do you want to take a crack at that, or you're good? Okay. All right. Another question, I think, for both of you, which is how do you feel about early childhood education with the incoming administration? What obstacles and opportunities could we expect in the long term?
Sure.
I'll go after you.
I will be brief. I have not seen any concrete plans in terms of early childhood education with the incoming administration. I think we will have, I know that at the state level, it is a priority for California. So perhaps it is something that we will need to rely on. But at the national level, with the incoming administration, I have not seen anything that is concrete. So I will leave it there and hand it off to Dr. Damooei.
My pleasure. In terms of entitlement, there's a federal part and there's a state part. The federal part is those who are actually below the poverty line, they're entitled to that, from the federal government. And it comes, through the usual channel. The other part is the state, anyway. But I think in this particular case, I don't really bet anything about the incoming administration. I think the state of California should take on the universal, high quality, early child education, period, regardless of what the federal government wants to do or doesn't want to do. By the way, while I'm on the issue of the budget, I tell you, California pays 4.5 times in terms of federal tax that he receives from the federal government. So the state of California subsidizes many of the states by the federal tax that they pay. I'm not suggesting something revolutionary happens in California, but here is the case. The capacity of California is subsidizing other states that don't have it. And I think, they should really look into these issues, a little more carefully. I don't know, I'm not really particularly proposing any suggestions for that, but that is the state of how much tax we pay, how much we get from the government. We get about 20-some% of the tax that we pay to the federal government, from federal government to our state.
Thank you. Thank you both. Any other comments or questions from the audience? We still have a few minutes left. If you'd like to ask or comment, now is the time. We do have some folks who work in the nonprofit sector on this call. So let me, on behalf of them and folks that I study and work with on behalf of the nonprofit community, let me ask both of you, maybe the last question. What kinds of advocacy or specific initiatives would you like to see the nonprofit community push for in the coming several years? Or let's reframe the question, what is your dream or your desire in terms of ECD programming coming from the civil society or the nonprofit sector? What would you wish may happen?
Okay, I make my wish. I think there are some nonprofits who are actually making a lot of strides there. I mean, I mentioned VCCF, Ventura Community Foundation. It's already received grants for supporting, because part of this structure is infrastructure. It means you have to build, whether it is training of the teachers, whether it's physical structure, whether transportation, whether community meetings. There's a lot of infrastructural investment. After that, you have what is called a budget reallocation, which is go for the current expenditure. So the nonprofit can be absolutely phenomenally important there in terms of supporting them, in terms of the funding, in terms of giving priority to that, and many of them there. And also the government, no doubt about it. I think businesses even, let me just also bring that in. It's so important because you remember this, for a family of 400% poverty level with one person with two kids, at 25% of their salary. If they want to bring people here, okay, in state of California as a whole, and say that, look, this is the greatest raise you ever had, is high quality early child education for those who have that kind of children. And that is a great boost for being more attractive in the real terms for those who come to California.
Perfect. Fabiola?
Yeah, I think in terms of some advocacy and initiatives that I'd like to see from organizations, local and at national level, I would really like to see more of climate change being at the center of it, because we are living that now. We will continue to experience natural disasters, not just in California, but in other parts of the country too. And so I'd really like to see more advocacy campaigns in terms of bringing awareness to how it is impacting young children and caregivers, and how we can develop better action plans and climate preparedness. I'd also like to see more collaboration with local climate experts as well. I think that's especially important in terms of really understanding the impact that this will have on future generations. And so making sure that we are also what many are calling greening programs. So making sure that programs are climate sensitive, and that includes teaching and learning materials, any sorts of like educational pamphlets, public service, mobilization efforts, and awareness efforts to really build knowledge and skills in the general public around what is happening related to climate change, and especially how to respond when these emergencies take place. So yeah.
All right, perfect. Thank you. That's a good way to end this conversation. Unless there are any final comments, we do have 3 minutes left. In the meanwhile, I will drop a link to our MPPA events webpage here. Feel free to click on it and save it for later. You can also get the slides. Thank you, Edith, for asking. We will make sure that the video recording and the slides will be made available shortly. You can also track this page, and we will upload the recording and other material on this. Also, the recordings of the previous talks are here for those of you interested. And once again, thank you all for joining today. Please spread the word, share this information with others about our events, invite them to join us. As I said at the beginning, we also have a conference on February 28th that is based on Dr. Damooei's research. And the conference is called Towards a Dignified Life for People Living in the Central Coast. So it promises to be a very enriching and very information-filled conference and meeting of minds. So we hope to see you there, as well as in the next upcoming MPPA policy talks or any other events. And if anyone's interested in learning more about the program, please ask them to talk to me. I'll be happy to talk to them, and hope to see you all in the coming events. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.